The autumn of 1888 was cold, damp, and unsettling in London's East End. Whitechapel was a district defined by poverty, overcrowding, and a sense of despair that hung in the air like the constant fog. The streets were narrow and poorly lit, filled with lodging houses, pubs, and alleys where the poorest of London struggled to survive. Crime, disease, and unemployment were everyday companions. Women often turned to sex work simply to afford a bed for the night. In this setting, a series of brutal murders would not only horrify the city but also reshape the role of the press in crime reporting forever. The killer himself, whoever he truly was, stalked women in Whitechapel, but the figure of the world knows today, Jack the Ripper, was not only shaped by blood and violence, he was forged in the columns of the newspapers, in ink as much as in flesh. The first killing that caught attention was the murder of Mary Ann Nichols on August 31, 1888. Her body was discovered in Bucks Row, her throat slashed, her abdomen mutilated. While Whitechapel was no stranger to violence, this killing had an unusual savagery. Local police began to investigate, but it was the press that gave the crime its reach. Within hours, reporters were at the scene, taking notes, talking to residents, and already imagining how to spin the murder for their readers. London's newspapers were in the middle of a fierce circulation war. Rival publishers competed to outdo one another with shocking stories that sold copies by the thousands. Crime reporting was a powerful tool. The poor read about lives like their own, while the middle and upper classes consumed these stories with a mix of fear and fascination about the other half. Murder, especially in the slums, made gripping copy. When Annie Chapman was killed on September 8, less than 2 weeks later, the story exploded. Her body was mutilated more gruesomely than Nichols, and whispers of a serial killer began to spread. Newspapers eagerly fed these rumors. The Star, a radical evening paper, ran the headline "Horrible Murder in Whitechapel" and described in lurid detail the wounds to Chapman's body. They used words like fiend, monster, and demon. The killer was already being painted as something more than human. The media discovered the power of narrative. Each murder became not just a report but a chapter in a growing Gothic tale. Papers exaggerated details, sometimes inventing them outright. They speculated about the killer's appearance, his motives, his madness. Readers devoured it. Circulation numbers soared. By late September, the press had fully realized the commercial potential of the killings. When the bodies of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Edos were found on the same night, September 30th, the story reached new heights. Stride's murder suggested an interrupted attack, while Edos' body was mutilated with shocking brutality. Newspapers described the night as one of terror, painting vivid pictures of dark alleys, drunken footsteps, and the silent stalker slipping into the fog. It was during this frenzy that letters began arriving at newspaper offices. Some were hoaxes, sent by pranksters eager to insert themselves into the drama. But one in particular changed everything. It was addressed "Dear Boss," written in red ink, and signed "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." Whether the letter came from the killer or from a journalist is still debated. What matters is that once the name appeared in print, it stuck. The press had given the killer his identity. No longer just the Whitechapel murderer, he was now Jack the Ripper persona that carried menace and mystery. The newspapers printed the letter widely, along with its mocking tone and grotesque promises. For readers, it was as if the killer himself had spoken directly to them through the page. For the press, it was a goldmine. Circulation surged again. From then on, the murders were not simply crimes. They were a serialized horror story unfolding in real time. Each new killing was framed as the next installment in a saga. The public followed every twist with morbid fascination. While the police struggled with conflicting evidence, limited technology, and a growing chorus of armchair detectives writing letters to the editors, the press turned the investigation into a spectacle. They criticized Scotland Yard, accused officials of incompetence, and published interviews with so-called experts. They even encouraged theories about the killer's identity, from a crazed butcher to a vengeful doctor to foreign immigrants. Anti-Semitic rumors were stoked, feeding public tension and prejudice. In many ways, the media coverage caused more panic than the crimes themselves. Meanwhile, the killings continued. Mary Jane Kelly, the last and most savagely mutilated victim, was discovered on November 9, 1888, inside her small room in Miller's Court. The press response was immediate and frenzied. Papers published grisly illustrations of the crime scene, exaggerating the gore to shock readers. The Ripper was now a household name, not just in London but across the world. American newspapers reprinted the stories, adding their own sensational touches. By this point, the press had built Jack the Ripper into something larger than life. He was not just a man but a myth, a boogeyman born of poverty, violence, and journalism. His story was carried into drawing rooms, pubs, and even theaters, where plays dramatized the murders within months. Penny dreadfuls and ballads retold the crimes with gory flourishes. The legend was spreading faster than the facts. In reality, the Whitechapel murders were horrific but not unique in their brutality. London had seen terrible crimes before, and would again. What made this case different was the media's role. The newspapers turned local murders into an international phenomenon, amplifying fear, shaping public opinion, and branding the killer with a name that still echoes today. Jack the Ripper was, in many ways, the first modern media-made criminal celebrity. His crimes coincided with the rise of mass circulation newspapers, cheap printing, and a public appetite for sensational stories. The press had learned a lesson. Crime sells, fear sells, and mystery sells. That formula continues to shape how we consume crime stories even now. Think about how true crime dominates podcasts, documentaries, and news channels today. The seeds of that fascination were planted in 1888, when the press turned a murderer into a legend. The irony is that the real man behind the name remains unknown, despite thousands of theories, endless books, and decades of investigation. Jack the Ripper's true identity has never been proven. He vanishes into history, but the legend created by the media endures. The story of Jack the Ripper is not just about unsolved murders. It is about how media shaped fear, how it created an archetype of the faceless killer in the dark. It shows how newspapers, desperate for sales, blurred the line between fact and fiction. And it reminds us that when we talk about Jack the Ripper, we are often talking less about a man and more about a story crafted in headlines. The killer terrified Whitechapel, but the monster the world knows, Jack the Ripper, was born in print. His shadow lingers not only in the alleys of East London but in every crime headline that seeks to shock, and every sensational story that builds fear into myth. And that is how the media created Jack the Ripper.